Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to TAM Lab number 49, Forwarding Security-Based Events from Log Insight into Splunk. This session is going to be run today by Nico Guerrera, one of our senior TAMs. So with that, Nico, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you so much. So hey, everyone. My name is Nico. I'm a senior technical account manager in the New England TAM team. Log Insight is kind of my, I guess you can call it, focus. So it's something I've been doing since before I got to VMware at my previous customer. I've gotten pretty good with it, and of course, once you know logging, people are always asking things about other products that might either work with Log Insight, you might be able to forward to, or you might be able to send events to. And the biggest one of those is, of course, our biggest competitor, which is also obviously could also be our biggest ally, Splunk. So when I first got here, a lot of the onus was on Log Insight does not charge for charge based on ingestion. Log Insight charges based on operating system instance or CPU core, something like that. And Splunk does charge based on how much you ingest. So the idea with Log Insight for a lot of customers since the beginning has been to have all your events come into Log Insight and then kind of forward what you need off to Splunk, whether that's security-based events or whether that's events for other teams that are in your customer's environment, whether it's like a networking team or a storage team, just kind of send what you need to Splunk and then cut down on your ingestion costs, save a lot of money. Splunk can get pretty expensive depending on how much you ingest. My previous employer used to ingest terabytes a day, so that got pretty expensive. I don't know how they did it actually. So Log Insight was kind of their solution when it was 1.0 for them to save a lot of money to do some ingestion through the VMware environment. So with that, let me just share my lab so we can get that going. Great. So to begin, I have a Log Insight virtual machine in my lab. And then I have Splunk running in an Ubuntu Linux instance. I use the free version of Splunk just to demo. It works pretty well for our needs. So I just want to give a basic one-on-one on what I'm running here. And then in my lab, this is my Log Insight instance. And then I have my Splunk instance here. So with that, you can see here, I have a few custom dashboards that I built. This is actually based on customer feedback. So basically, as a TAM tech lead, I've spoken to customers who are saying, these are the kind of events I want to go to Splunk. So you can kind of see some stuff like failed logins for vCenter, ESX shell commands, that's a big one. They want to know who's running what once they're logged in. Another big one was, if we've added permissions to vCenter or a vCenter user has been created, I want to know that user has been created and what permissions have been attached to him. Not to mention a few other things like, ESX shell logins. That was another big one. Log Insight itself has a great default vSphere dashboard that gives you a lot of good information on authentication and auditing. So you can get counts of administrator roles configured, audit events by type. You can get failed login attempts by source, and ESX host. This is a lot of good stuff. So, we've got all this great information that Log Insight already gives us. So if we go right back to my dashboards. So let's look at something like these shell commands. So if we open this in interactive analysis. So all I'm doing here is taking we have a field here called app name. So the app name is kind of the quote unquote application that is running in the event. So the application is technically the shell. The ESX shell is the application. So right here, I'm just doing something as simple as app name for my extracted field starts with shell. And that's basically, that will show the ESX shell. And then when I run that query, I ran this for about a month. You can see here, anything matching that app name shell comes back. So right here, you can see what I'm doing when I log into my ESX host. LS's, I'm tailing some logs. I'm running some ESX CLI network commands, grabbing some storage commands. So right here, you can see that me as the root user, I'm running these commands. So you could do this based on event type. That's another good way to do it. Or you could do it based on the app name. So as long as we can grab these fields from the log, we can make a forwarding rule to forward these things to Splunk. So, event type's a little more cryptic. It doesn't really give you a good idea of what it is. It's kind of just a string of numbers and letters. I liked a little more understanding by doing the shell. So this will grab any shell output. So that was a pretty important requirement that one customer had for forwarding events from Log Insight to Splunk. Another good one we have is failed logins. So let's go. So for this, instead of app name vCenter server, to me that was a little too generic. So instead, I searched for, we have an extracted field called VC event type, and then SSO login failure. So I took anything that contains this event type of SSO login failure, and I just queried that. So we can see here, failing logins for the administrator user from this machine right here, this Windows VM I'm in with time. So that's a pretty, yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, Nico. So how did you find up there the VC event type is COM VMware SSO login failure? Was there some documentation, or
no,
how would we find that
straight troubleshooting? So I literally, here's what I did. I typed in failed login because I knew I had failed my login. And then I went, okay, interesting. So let's see here what the common correlation is between all, me trying to look for these. So I went through these. I'm like, okay, so the event type, that's pretty good. And then I think I went through, there's another one here. You can do SOC, ESIXI, autostate. So I went through and I kind of looked for what is the common correlation between all of these are all ESIX ones. They're not actually, I don't think I've done any failed vCenter logins yet in a while, but I basically found that as my correlating event was that extracted field. And it basically said, SSO login event. So I took that, added a filter, text starts with or contains that. And then I just did basic a query. I made sure that was everything I wanted to see. It gave me the IP address of the originating machine, where I was going, what user was logging in. And once I saw that information was relevant for me, I basically said, this is what I want to forward. So I'm going to make a dashboard out of it, and then I'm going to make a forwarding rule out of it. So
that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. The documentation on this is kind of sparse, honestly. We could do a little more on what all these different extracted fields are for all the different content packs. I don't think we have anything like that. So a lot of it is going to be based on your ability to go into this product and kind of just learn how the events are structured and how these extracted fields look depending on the content pack you have installed. So, different content packs, you're going to have different fields. With the base ones, you're going to have stuff like source, event type, data center, object ID. If you have vRops installed and connected, you're going to have a whole new set of extracted fields based on, vRops. So you kind of want to avoid, you want to make your queries and your searches as generic as possible. So that's why I kind of try and stick to the basic extracted fields that come just with standard Log Insight. So source and event type and data center. And I think with a lot of this, your customer's probably going to want to use event type since it's unique to the actual event that's happening. So kind of once you get a hold of that event type and you query off of it, so we can do events like this. And then once we drill down, we can kind of see, I wanted to see every event type that's of this string. You can see all my failed login attempts happening one by one.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then you can correlate that, and then you can say, this is exactly what I'm looking for. X number of failed login attempts. ESX, local user, root. Kind of important to know that the root user is trying to log in, and he got locked out for 900 seconds after failing his login attempt 10 times. So, yeah, a lot of it, it's not really documentation based. A lot of this is definitely trial and error. And a lot of my experience with writing a lot of queries and kind of understanding how these extracted fields work is trial and error. Yeah. So that's kind of how I got a lot of it. So I've actually been thinking about writing a basic dashboard, like a content pack that I can extract that has a lot of stuff that customers are asking for. So that might be something I work on in the future. But right now I'm kind of just trying to collect what the most important things that customers are asking for that might not be in the marketplace under content packs, or might not be a standard, Log Insight dashboard. kind of like DRS being disabled. That's a big one that my customer asked for. They had contractors at night that were doing VMware upgrades on their ESX hosts and leaving DRS off come the morning, and they didn't know who was doing it. So that's not something that I don't think that Log Insight grabs that as a default dashboard, or at least I haven't seen anything like that. So something like DRS disabled was something that I think is pretty important that would make for a good content pack. Something
No
like
doubt.
events to check for, health check, stuff like that, that customers can check really quickly and be like, okay, why was DRS not re-enabled on these 5 hosts last night, or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. So back to this. So once we have kind of what we want from our fields, what we want to extract, what we want to grab, whether it's the event type, whether it's the app name, like I had shell and the other one, or the SSO login type. Once we have those defined, we can go to the event forwarding section of Log Insight, and you can see right here, here's 2 things I'm already forwarding to Splunk: ESX console commands and ESX shell logins. So be very, very careful with this, because I don't know why, but there's a limit of 10 forwarding events that you can do. I think that's very minimal. Every time I tell any customer, they're like, what are we going to do with 10 forwarding rules? That's nothing. The only thing I could say to them is make what you forward to Splunk as generic as possible, so you grab as many things within one set of forwarding rules. So maybe you want to forward all login events, and then when it gets to Splunk, break it up into ESX and vCenter. Forward all shell logins, and then when it gets to Splunk, break it up into vCenter, ESX, or maybe other Linux, other appliances we have. Because if you go in and you start making very specific forwarding rules to go to different areas, you're going to run out in no time with that 10 rule limit. So 10 might be good enough for Splunk, but then they might have another logging product. They might be sending things to another Log Insight instance, in a DR location or in a tertiary data center. So they can fill this up pretty quickly. So if you're working with your customer to do forwarding to Splunk, just make sure they understand 10 rule limit. Make your rules as robust as possible, as generic as possible. It kind of defeats the purpose, because you kind of want to, the whole point of forwarding to Splunk is to kind of cut down on the events you're sending to Splunk. But if you have to send extra events that you have no intention of using, it kind of makes no sense to me. I probably would like to know, probably get in touch with the PM at some point and understand if that limit is ever going to be increased, because it makes for some tough decisions for the customers.
So real quick then, so I see here in your filter column, it says app name matches shell, right, or SSHD.
I'll go into the actual.
So are there OR options? So shell or SSHD, and then you could actually combine those into a single rule?
So the only rules you can do here, unfortunately, is what you see in the filter. So you can do matches shell, matches does not match start with or does not start with. And then you can add another filter, and kind of, there's no and or. So
okay.
Yeah. It's pretty basic.
Okay.
So what they have here is basically what you can do back in the interactive analysis page. It's kind of the same thing, and then you can even run it to test it in the interactive analysis once you write this. So yeah, what it does do, which is pretty cool, it kind of gives you this kind of drop down of all the events that it thinks you might be looking for based on count. So I said shell. If you wanted to forward VM kernel events, you could do that. So it's got some cool little nuances there, but yeah, as far as advanced functionality like that, there's nothing really to be found.
Okay.
Yeah. So for here, you could see that I'm sending my events to my Splunk server, which is my Ubuntu machine. Protocol always has to be syslog. Obviously, the ingestion API is proprietary to us, talking in between Log Insight instances. So syslog is kind of the standard open source protocol. So you're always going to have to use that. One thing you want to do, which I think is pretty cool, you can add secondary tags to be forwarded along with the event. So I added 2 tags that basically say this is coming from my lab data center, and the event is ESX console. So then when you go into Splunk, when we go later on to check that out, we're going to see that there's 2 new tags that come in with the event that are data center equals lab and event equals ESX console. So in your customers case, they might want to say data center equals, Phoenix or Austin, just to show where it's coming from. Or they could say cluster equals Oracle, cluster equals SQL Server, if they want to give tags like that. And then the event, I just give it this event to understand what it is as it's coming from Log Insight. So ESX console commands, I just say event equals ESX console. And then I tell it to kind of forward our complementary tags. So it knows to forward them along with the standard tags that are coming from syslog. This makes the event a little more powerful once it gets into Splunk, because you can kind of, when you're in Splunk, you can start querying and building alerts. You can start building dashboards based on these tags, not just the standard tags that come from the event. You could choose your transport type, TCP or UDP, pretty simple. This is going to be important when we go into Splunk later on to configure the ingestion. Our actual filter, so same thing as I showed you in the interactive analysis, app name matches shell. You can keep adding filters to narrow it down as much as you want. Remember, the more things you add, kind of the slower it's going to get, because it has to go through all these filters to kind of understand what events it has to forward. So if your customer has a Log Insight environment that's chugging a little, they might want to add a few more nodes before they start doing this. Usually that's not a problem with most customers, but the more that any analytics engine kind of has to analyze these fields and understand what to forward, it's going to take some time. In the advanced settings, I took port 514 and worker count, simultaneous outgoing connections. I just did 2 since this is a basic home lab. You can go up to 32 depending on how robust their networking environment is and other things. So when we have that, we can do the test, make sure that we can talk to Splunk. We can run this in interactive analysis, make sure that we're getting everything we want. So here's all my shell commands that I ran. So once we verify we're good on this end, we can come here to Splunk. So I'm by no means a Splunk expert. I kind of just learned enough to get these events into Splunk and build some basic dashboards. So hopefully your customer has a Splunk team who can go in once the events start pulling in and start extracting fields and building queries off of what they want to see. I'm kind of just sending in, I'm just building a dashboard based on exactly what is coming in to Splunk from Log Insight. So we go to settings, and I think we go to data inputs. Yep, and we have here one data input, TCP. It's listening on port 514 TCP for incoming data. So we can just go through this pretty quick to show you what I did to receive the events from Log Insight. So it's a TCP from port 514. That's a standard port. You can tell it to only accept connections from a certain IP address. So in mine, I literally just told it to take from the Log Insight server itself. If your customer has a cluster, they probably want to pull in from the VIP, the virtual IP address, but I only have one node. So I just give it the Log Insight node. It's going to be upset because I already have one. And then the source type, I literally just, somebody with more experience in Splunk might actually know what to choose from this, but I took standard syslog. I just took Linux message syslog as the source type. Kind of this stuff I left all default. Host method, I left that at DNS. I have it in my default index. I only have one index. And then you would review this. Make sure you're going to the right port. Make sure it's restricted to the correct host, correct source type. And then we can click submit. And then it would create a new rule to be able to ingest the data from this IP address on this port using the TCP protocol into Splunk. Okay, and then we can go back here. And then we can either do a search or a report. So we'll do the last 7 days. So if we go back to our forwarding rules. So let's take the console commands. So let's search for event equals ESX console to make sure that our custom tag came through. So we can just do a basic search. All right, so this is everything from Log Insight into Splunk that has that tag event equals ESX console. As you could see, it's the same exact event that came from Log Insight. Here's one thing that, it's kind of unfortunate, but it's just the way syslog works. Everything is going to have a host of the Log Insight server as the source. So, it doesn't, in Log Insight, it knows it's coming from ESX host 1234. It knows the IP. It knows where it's coming from. Once you forward it on to Splunk, the source becomes Log Insight for everything. So, that's just the way syslog works. The only way I think that you would be able to kind of make it work is if you took, you had somebody on the Splunk team basically say, oh, that was a test message. All right. So you'd have to have somebody on the Splunk team basically say, okay, so this is the ESX host it came from. So, but it's not actually a field. It's kind of just text inside the event message. So somebody would have to take ESX nest and extract it out of here and, give it a value of host name. So then you can query on host name inside Splunk. Because if you were to query on host name, you would get the Log Insight server. You want to be able to query, either ESX host name or something like that, and basically say that, here's the ESX host it's coming from. So then you can do correlation that way. Because this isn't very useful, unfortunately, but if you can extract out something like this, you can even extract out, if you want to extract out the shell, or if you want to extract out the data center, all this is here for us to consume. We just have to extract it in Splunk and give it a way to query, whether either with regular expressions or some other way. So there's still a lot of work to be done once you get the event into Splunk. It's not just you're finished and you can go on. You kind of have to make sure that these events make sense for the security team, that they can, they have all the tools in place, whether that's, like I said, through regular expressions or extracted fields or anything like to any other way to be able to make this data valuable to them. Because if they just pull this in and they see this and they try and run a query on the ESX host and nothing comes up, they're going to be like, well, what good was this? So make sure your customer understands when they do the forwarding, they have to work with the Splunk team to kind of clean this up so it makes sense for the security team and it makes sense from an event perspective that it has everything that they need. So we can see here, this is my list of events based on ESX console. So we can see here, here's the actual command that was run. ESX CLI storage core adapter list, same as when we looked in Log Insight, device list, stuff like that. And then if we go into the shell logins, we'll just take this event. We'll do a search on it. And same as in Log Insight, here's all my failed logins. They're coming from, everything comes from Log Insight, of course. But of course, if they need to massage the data accordingly, they could do it by data center, by ESX nest. Again, here's my ESX host that these events are coming from. So they can kind of extract that and make it work that way. SSHD, that's the app. So they can extract that if they want and make it work for them. So you can even get, here's the machine I'm on right now. So there's a lot of good information here. They just have to make it work for the security team. And then, trying to learn Splunk, I kind of just made some dashboards. So right when I log in, I made 2 basic dashboards when I log in right in my home screen that basically say, here's all the ESX logins, here's all the ESX shell commands, and then, they can kind of get to work doing what they need to do. These can obviously be a lot cleaner once you get the Splunk team involved and you have them clean up a lot of these dashboards. So it's a very powerful tool, Splunk. Log Insight's also a very powerful tool. We don't want them to, be at odds. Like we say, they're better together. Log Insight's always better together with other tools because, either with vRops, you can forward events to vRops, you can forward events to Splunk, you could forward events to all your other logging items. And it just works better together. So that's the meat of it. That's kind of everything I had to show. Can I answer any questions that anyone might have?
Well, it could be maybe a silly question, I'm not sure, but
of course.
When you're forwarding these logs from Log Insight to wherever, could be Splunk in this instance, is there any kind of delay Does it run every 5 minutes and batch the changes over to Splunk, or is it real time as a event is generated? It's sent over to the forwarding destination.
Yeah, it says real time as basically your network allows it.
Got it.
So once login site ingests the event, it sees that and it says, okay, so I have to send a copy to a copy at the same time to the other destination. So the reason it does that is so you can't tamper with the event.
Yep. Okay.
So if login site were to take the event and put it in its bucket, somebody were to go in there and tamper with it and then send it out again, then you have two bad events. So if it takes the event and sends one to the bucket and one off to the other forwarding destination, it kind of keeps the integrity of the event to make sure that nobody has tampered with it. So it's not like vRealize operations, I think, runs on a 5-minute scan for most things. This is real time. It'll send events in real time. If you overwhelm either the network or login site or your destination, it will show you that it dropped events. It will not retransmit those events, but it'll show you that it dropped events, and it'll show you how many events it has forwarded per second, as well as events forwarded. Obviously, my lab is very small, so I'm not exactly killing it with events, so I don't really drop many, but you can see when it's not sending anymore, it's idle, and you can see what protocol it's using. So for most customers, this would rarely be idle. If they have an entire VMware environment running and forwarding to Splunk, this should be going all the time, and this should be moving up, in the hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands. So, if you're helping your customer do forwarding, you should always see events being forwarded. If at any point there's no events being forwarded, either they're working in a very small lab or there's something wrong.
Nico, this is Jody. In response to that answer about kind of the quantity of the alerts, did you or your customers work with the networking team and the security team to kind of get a baseline of what's expected, so that you could prepare for it, they were going to be aware of it, and also to detect any anomalies if that did either spike or drop down really low?
So we do have a nice login site sizing calculator, and one of the parameters it does give you is network throughput rate that these events would use based on what the values you put in. So if you say I'm going to have a 3-node login site instance and I'm going to ingest this many events per second, it's going to tell you you're going to use this much more networking. And honestly, it's almost never even in the megabytes or in the high megabytes. It's all text. And I think it is even compressed. If you send between login site instances, it's compressed too. So the networking is almost never really an issue once the customer kind of sees the actual numbers from the sizing calculator. And yes, if an ESX host is sending events to login site and they start being dropped, it will monitor that and it'll tell you that it's not getting events. Unfortunately, I don't think that there's a way to monitor if events get dropped from the forwarding pane. That's something I could look into, but I think you actually have to come in here and see if any events have been dropped in the meantime. But yes, the networking team should always be involved, even if it's just for them to say, oh, that's nothing. That's not even a concern. That's 10,000 events per second. That's a few kilobytes, a few thousand kilobytes, a few megabytes. That's not going to put any strain. Or hey, we have a pipe that's severely clogged. We can't put any more strain on it. Here's what you have to do: either forward it somewhere else or lower the amount of forwarding, because you never want to get caught in a situation where login site tips over a network or something to 100%, and then they shut it off and never turn it back on. Because I've seen that before with other products. So
yeah,
yeah, no problem. Anyone else?
I guess one other question that I have, Nico, is we have management packs that you can bolt onto login site. Are those management packs something that we can grab, in a filter? So maybe what we care about is specifically Horizon or something like that, right? For whatever reason. So maybe can we grab those?
So I have a management pack right here for Kubernetes pods.
Oh, cool.
So right here, you can see we can grab the Kubernetes container name, the namespace, and the pod. So yes, you should be able to, if you install a certain content pack, the extracted field should show up here. I don't have too many content packs installed, but just there from the Kubernetes one alone, you could see that what I had there was sent over to the field. So basically, anything that you see here, as long as you have the content packs checked,
Yep.
then any filter you see here should translate to the other. Yeah. So if you have a vSAN
That's
content
awesome.
pack installed, you should be able to forward based on those events. And if not, you can always, if there's something you're looking for that is not a field, you can always make your own field. You can literally just be like, oh, NFS volume. I want to know, I want to know what NFS volumes. I can extract the field. And then once that field is extracted, you can start doing cool regex things, which are beyond me. And then once you have that, it'll happen. It'll come down here on a field, just like all these other fields we have. And then you should be able to, write filters on it and do forwarding on it. So you're not limited to the fields that come with Log Insight or the content packs. You can always extract your own fields if you want to. Although the more fields you extract, the slower things work because it's got to compare things against that field. So if you build 100 more fields, that's going to take a toll on your Log Insight instance. So try not to do that unless you really need it.
Yeah. One other question just popped in my mind. Can we leverage tags like vCenter tags to filter on?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think. The event would have to have the tag in it.
Yeah. Okay.
So usually most events don't have the tags in them unless you're creating the tag or deleting the tag or assigning the tag to something. It might create an event, but just day to day, it's not going to know. It's not going to know tags.
Yeah. I was just thinking of what are the different ways we can grab interesting information that we'd want to forward over to Splunk, for example. Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, a lot of that you're going to want to do with either the event type or the what was the other? The event type or some of these other extracted fields that we talked about. The source. If you're looking at everything from a source, but yeah, tags is not a logging thing. It's kind of an ESX VMware thing. It's not really a syslog thing, so it doesn't really know how to grab them.
Got it.
Yep. Hopefully your customers and you find this useful, getting them started down the path. I know I wrote a blog on forwarding events to Splunk, kind of what we just talked about here, and I get an email probably once a month with, oh my God, this is the most helpful thing ever. Can you please talk to my customer? Oh my God, this is the only resource out there talking about Log Insight to Splunk. I want you to talk to my customer about it. So it's been my hottest hit blog, and it's been one of the hottest topics that TAMs want to talk about when they bring me in from the tech leads to their customers, more so than anything else. So, if you have a customer that you want to bring in, just put in a TAM tech leads request. I am in the cloud management TAM tech lead team, and I can definitely sit with your customer and talk about, basics like we talked about today, how to set up a forwarding event, for what they're looking for and get it to Splunk. I'm not going to be able to sit down with a customer and go through the entire Splunk environment and how to create dashboards and how to extract fields, but I definitely can help them out on the Log Insight side if they want to get started there.
Perfect. Well, anything else from anybody? All right, I hear crickets. Well, Nico, thank you so much for your time in doing this. I appreciate it, and everybody have a fantastic rest of your day, and we'll catch you in the next TAM Lab.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Scott.